Gay Liberation Front. After World War II, the civil rights movement had a profound impact in other groups demanding their rights. The feminist movement, the Black Power movement, the environmental movement, the Chicano movement, and the American Indian movement sought equality, rights, and empowerment in American society. Gay people organized to resist oppression and demand just treatment, and they were especially galvanized after a New York City police raid on the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar, sparked riots in 1969. Background. By the 1960s, a new wave of social activism fueled by the civil rights movement and other social movements inspired them to resist oppression and discriminatory laws. In August 1966, the police raided Compound's cafeteria and hung out for mostly transgender and queer people in the Telenor neighborhood of San Francisco. After the owner of the cafeteria had complained that transgender people were loitering there. They congregated at the Compound's cafeteria because gay bars often were hostile to them and provided them for hanging out there. When the police arrived at Compound's to arrest the people for loitering, an uprising ensued. The customers fought the police, throwing coffee cups, smashing plates, and breaking windows. The next evening, protests gathered in front of the Compound's cafeteria to mark their resistance to the oppression. The exact date of the Compound's cafeteria uprising remains unknown, but it did predate a better known event called the Stonewall Uprising, which lasted 6 days. On June 28, 1969, a group of LGBTQ people resisted and then fought back after the police attempt to raid their bar, the Stonewall Inn in New York City, Greenwich Village.
Stonewall. In 1969, police raids of gay bars in Manhattan followed a template. Officers would put in, threatening, and beating bar staff and clientele. Patrons could put out, lining up on the street so police could arrest them. But when police raided Stonewall Inn in the early morning hours of June 28, 1969, things didn't go as expected. Patrons and onlookers fought back, and the days-long melee that ensued characterized them as a riot and now known as the Stonewall Rebellion helped spark the modern LGBTQ civil rights movement. Before Stonewall, LGBTQ people lacked political clout and had no recourse even if their bars were attacked, so the police often didn't even need to justify their raids. By standing up the police at the Stonewall Inn, LGBTQ people began an organized movement to fight discrimination. Consequently, the Stonewall Uprising has come to symbolize the start of the modern gay liberation movement. Members of the movement staged the first gay protest in Philadelphia on July 4, 1965, in front of Independence Hall. During the demonstration, they followed the politics of respectability, a strategy learned from the Black Civil Rights Movement, and dressed in suits and skirts. After Stonewall, however, a more radical political consciousness developed that resulted from the formation of many groups, including the Gay Liberation Front and radical lesbians, whose members rejected these strategies and called for more militant response to homophobia. These groups were interested not just in gaining rights, but also in challenging systems of power like capitalism, which they believed oppressed them. Yet despite the revolutionary change, violence stalled the gay liberation movement during the 1970s. On June 24, 1973, members of the MCC carried in the upstairs lounge, a bar that I had converted into a church in New Orleans, to hold their weekly meeting. An unidentified arsonist set fire to the establishment, tragically killing 32 people and injuring many others. The arsonist was never identified, was the largest tragedy involving LGBTQ people in the U.S. history until the 2016 shooting at the Pulse nightclub massacre in Orlando, Florida. Nacho. 6 months after the meeting in Kansas City, delegates gathered in San Francisco and held the first North American Conference of Homophile Organization, or NACHO. The organization, named as a coalition of homophile organizations, was the degree to which members were reluctant to lose their organizational independence. In addition, copious amounts of conference time was spent on structural details like membership, credentialing, and voting rights. Every distinct conference course agreed to continue to meet on an annual basis, generating a permanent outcome from the first planning meeting in Kansas City.
Main characters: Harvey Milk, in full Harvey Vernon Milk, born in May 22, 1930, and died in November 27, 1978, was an American politician and gay rights activist. Milk served in the USA Navy during the Korean War and received an other than honorable discharge in 1955 for having engaged in sexual acts with other enlisted men. He held several jobs before becoming a financial analyst in New York. In 1972, he moved to San Francisco, where he opened a camera store and soon gained a following as a leader in the gay community. His popularity grew when he challenged the city gays leadership, which he thought was too conservative in its attempts to gain greater political rights for homosexuals. In 1973, Milk ran for a seat on the city's board of supervisors but was defeated. After another unsuccessful bid in 1976, he was elected in 1977, becoming one of the first openly gay elected officials in the USA history. Around the 1950s, biologist Alfred Kinsey began a massive study of human sexuality. Kinsey believed sexuality could be studied as a science. He interviewed more than 8,000 men and argued that sexuality existed on a spectrum, saying that it could not be confined to simple categories of homosexual and heterosexual. To evaluate sexual activities, Kinsey used a scale that assigned a number from 0 to 6 to rate sexual urges. A rating of 0 means exclusively heterosexual and a rating of 6 means exclusively homosexual. Kinsey rejected most people's self-identification at either end of the spectrum because their other answers indicated that they often fell somewhere in between. Kinsey broke ground by discussing a taboo subject in frank terms. His analysis broke down rigidly held categories of sexuality and empowered many gay people to fight for social change. Conclusion: the rise of the gay liberation movement signaled the end of the homophile approach to gay rights. The political activism of the 1970s and the 1980s began to change public attitudes about LGBTQ people in American society and led to significant change in public policy. In Lawrence v. Texas, the Supreme Court legalized same-sex sexual activity in 2003. In 2010, Congress permitted gay people to serve openly in the military. In 2013, the Supreme Court struck down the Defense of Marriage Act in United States, and made same-sex marriage legal under the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment. Attitudes continue to change, indicating growing acceptance of LGBTQ people.